Excellent!
What's up guys, today's video is going to be about testing the new GTX 1060 just launched by NVIDIA on a 21:9 aspect ratio monitor. That's 21:9 aspect ratio, and the resolutions I'm going to be testing are 3440 by 1440, which is the native resolution of my Acer Predator X34 monitor back there. Also going to be testing at 2560 by 1080, where you can find more affordable monitors at that lower resolution. But of course, these are all 21:9 aspect ratio monitors, also known as ultra-wide. And a couple weeks ago, when the RX 480 from AMD launched, I did some testing with this card, specifically to see how it performs using these types of monitors. The reasons are, it's a pretty cool monitor resolution and aspect ratio to game at, especially like a 34-inch 3440 by 1440. But if you're looking for a wider, more immersive experience, and you've considered doing multi-monitor configurations in the past, an ultra-wide is definitely a great option because you don't have to spend the money on 3 monitors, you don't have to deal with bezels in between the monitors as you're setting them up, and especially if you get like a curved wraparound one, you can sit kind of in the sweet spot with it, and it's just a fantastic experience. It's a little bit more immersive, gives you a wider field of view, which could even potentially give you an edge in some games. Let's take a quick look at the Wikipedia page on 21:9 aspect ratio. This matches up also with CinemaScope, so if you're into watching CinemaScope style movies, if you have access to that, it's another great reason to do that. The anamorphic format of 2.39:1. And just to be very specific, since we're dealing with aspect ratios and also fractions, which could be reduced, it's not actually 21:9, it's 21 1/3 by 9. If it wasn't 21 1/3 by 9, it would be 7 by 3, which doesn't roll off the tongue quite as easily. Anyway, here's a comparison. So 4:3 content natively looks like this. It's just a little bit wider than it is tall. If you move up to 16:9, it gets wider again, 16 units wide by 9 units tall. And then 21:9 is 21 units wide by 9 units tall. So you can see natively 4:3 looks like this, 16:9 looks like this, 21:9 looks like this. Let's look at some actual monitors here. These are all listed on Newegg and being sold by Newegg, so you can tell 21:9 monitors actually have a pretty low entry price too. So for a 25-inch one, you got an LG here for $150, $160, $190. Pretty decent range, and then these of course scale up as the size goes up. 29-inch. You might also start to see some 3440 by 1440 monitors in there with the 2560 by 1080. Anyway, though, I will link this search in the description if you guys want to check it out, as well as some more monitors available on Amazon. The other thing you might consider if you're looking at a 21:9 monitor is getting a FreeSync or a G-Sync option. I'm going to be using G-Sync back here, but the G-Sync monitors are a little bit more expensive. FreeSync 29-inch 21:9 you can get for as little as $300 to $350, and 2560 by 1080 at 29 inches is a very good aspect ratio and size. If you jump up to 34-inch, you will find 2560 by 1080 as well as 3440 by 1440 monitors in there. Just bear in mind the 3440 by 1440 ones do cost quite a bit more. These are all FreeSync compatible, so again, if you're buying, you will need to use an AMD GPU for them to work properly with this. If you want G-Sync and this aspect ratio, it gets a bit more expensive. There's only 3440 by 1440 models available that I could see. My Acer Predator X34 is $1,200, which is pretty expensive. Hey, open box, you can get a little bit cheaper. But if you want G-Sync and this size and that aspect ratio, you kind of got to pay a little bit of extra cash. Anyway, the card I'm using though for today's benchmarks is the GeForce GTX 1060 G1 Gaming. Just launched, and it works pretty good. I'll show you more of that in just a second, but first let's take a closer look at the card. So the first thing you might notice is this is a pretty substantial card for a GTX 1060. It is long. It's about 11 inches long total, so make sure you have enough room in your case to fit the whole thing. Other than that, it's got a WindForce 2X cooling system, so it's got 2 fans up on top. The benefit you get from the increased size is that there's 2 huge aluminum fin stacks in there with some copper heat pipes transferring heat from the GPU over to them. You also get a nice value add of a backplate on here, pretty clean looking design with the Gigabyte logo on it. It's also just all black with just that white logo, so that's pretty nice. There are some orange accents on the shroud itself, which are pretty minimal, but if you're not building an orange system, chances are these will be facing down and won't really show too much. Or, you know, you could paint over them if you really wanted to go that route. As far as video outs, they're pretty much standard for the 1060, 3 display ports, 1 HDMI, 1 DVI-D, and then they are introducing some RGB LEDs on this card. The Gigabyte logo lights up RGB, the fan stop logo also lights up with LED, and the fan stop logo, of course, will light up when the fans aren't spinning, which they'll do if the card is at idle, and then they start spinning up when the card hits about 50 or 60 degrees Celsius. Oh yeah, and I also did some overclocking on this card first before I ran any of these benchmarks. So you're looking at some slightly juiced numbers. I tried to keep things reasonable. I ended up dropping about 100 points onto the GPU and about 450 points onto the memory. So the GPU under full load was running at about 2030 to 2050. Memory was at 4450. I figured this was a pretty reasonable overclock that most people should be able to hit, even if you're buying a base level $250 GTX 1060. Gigabyte has provided a bit of extra power for this card with an 8-pin PCI Express graphics connector rather than a 6-pin, and that's about all I have to say about this card physically. Let's see how it performs.
Alright, a little GTA 5. We are at 2560 by 1080 and just kind of roaming around in the open world, getting in the low 80s frame rate.
I'm recording the screen directly with the camera because as far as I know 21:9 capture cards do not exist yet, and I'm using the overlay either with Precision X or with the built-in Vulkan overlay in Doom, so you guys can see the frame rates, and I've sort of blown that up and placed it in the bottom right corner so you guys can get a better look at it.
For settings, I'm using pretty much the same setup that I use for benchmarking, which is no FXAA, MSAA at by 2. Pretty much all the sliders set to high, everything else set to very high in here. I do have one or two things set to off or soft on soft shadows, and then high on ambient occlusion and tessellation.
Get out the fucking way.
It's my good deed for the day. Save that poor woman's life. I gotta get some knockout gas here.
Pull over right now.
You'll never catch me, coppers. Actually, they were never in really close to me. One star is almost gone. Cop pops up out of nowhere. Scopes me. Suddenly I got the 5-0 on my tail like a bee's on a bear's ass. Frame rate's been doing good. Originally I was in the mid to low 80s, and now it's getting up over 100 from time to time.
Hey, Lest, I got the good night gas.
That's everything we need. I'll put out word that the score is ready to go.
Score's ready. Nice. Alright, so verdict for GTA 5 2560 by 1080 is between 80 to 100 frames per second, at least with the very high settings that I am using. Should be great for most monitors up to 100 Hz, and of course you can turn some settings down if you need to get a higher frame rate for 120 or 144. Ready to switch over though to 3440 by 1440. Alright, so first glance at 3440 by 1440 is frame rate's a little bit lower than we might find acceptable. It's in the mid-50s. So I'm actually going to make a couple adjustments to some settings here and see if we can get up into a more acceptable range. Alright, so in order to improve the frame rate for 3440 by 1440, I have done the following. Basically switched a couple things to high texture and shader qualities. Also grass quality down to normal, since grass quality can definitely have a huge impact. That's just about it. That got me a good 10 or 15 frames per second. Went from the mid-50s up to well, it's been about 70 to 80 depending on what I'm doing. Sometimes in the 60s, of course.
All right, you got it
So
down.
with G-Sync, this should be okay for me for now.
Gas on these guys, you'll kill 'em.
Gotta make our getaway. Get to the sewers. This always reminds me of Terminator 2 for some reason. Taking out the cops.
You asshole.
Alright, so GTA 5, even at 3440 by 1440, 1060 still seems to be able to handle it pretty well. Just gotta adjust a few settings to get well above 60 frames per second. Moving on to some Doom, starting off with 2560 by 1080, and got the frame rate counter going out there. Oh geez, and I'm being attacked. I'm gonna try to do slightly better at Doom this time around. Oh, this is a big guy, isn't it? Danger. Anyway, point is, I'm getting, shucks, 100 frames per second, give or take, up or down, plus or minus. Something after me? I hear noises. It's always scary when you hear noises. I also have no idea where I'm supposed to be going, really. Oh, Jesus! That scared the shit out of me. I don't like you. Okay, before we jump up to 3440 by 1440, I have just turned the anti-aliasing mode to TSSAA, which I'm told is the mode that you're supposed to do in order to get the good asynchronous compute stuff working. Feels clunkier for some reason. Oh, this looks wonderful. There's weird stuff going on with this TSSA thing. Yeah, it feels different. And my frame rate seems to have dipped a little bit. Oh, good. Okay. Hey, where'd you come from? People just popping up out of nowhere. I have a bunch of weapon points that I should probably use. And now let's go ahead and switch over to 3440 by 1440. Alright, frame rate has definitely dropped down. We got a lot of red showing up there. Because we're down below 60 frames per second. That's no good. So before I even get very far at all... Oh look, there's another one of these. Convenient. Anyway, before I get very far at all, I'm going to switch up some of the settings. Well, we got TSSAA on, so we're using asynchronous computes, or some of the asynchronous compute features that they have enabled here with the Vulkan. And then other than that, we're set to high graphics qualities, the presets across the board. Let's kill some stuff. Nothing can go wrong. Ah. Well, that was fun.
Demonic threat reduced by 50%.
Oh, good. I like how it gives you the percentages.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Overwatch 2560 by 1080.
Objective A.
Damage boost engaged. Securing the objective. Enemy seen.
So I'm noticing that the frame rate is dropping and showing like 14 FPS at times. That seems to be a glitch. That's definitely not... Oh, get off me. That was bad timing. But yeah, it's showing 14 frames per second at times. That's not actually happening. When it's at 100 or 95 or whatever in that range, that's what I'm actually getting.
Increase.
Yay, we won! I was getting a very nice frame rate at 2560 by 1080, at least in the 95 to 105 FPS range. Switching it up now to 3440 by 1440.
The humans who live here are fools to trust the Omnics. They will see.
We are in harmony.
Alright, so just for starters here at 3440 by 1440, getting in the mid to upper 60s. Again, you might see the counter dropping down to 13, 14 FPS. That is a glitch. It is actually not dropping that low of frame rate, I can tell. Okay, I'm still at 3440 by 1440, but I have switched from Epic to Ultra settings and did the restart already, so I'm going to see what this does to my frame rate. Again, I do have a 100 Hz monitor, so if I can get closer to 100 frames per second, that would be nice. Alright, so when the FPS counter is working, it's going between 90 and maybe 100 to 110 frames per second. I guess it's also dipping down to the 80s sometimes as well. Oh, I should be healing. Anyway though, definitely very nice and playable. And again, that's at Ultra. Just one step down from Epic.
So those are my tests, guys, and I hope if you were looking at a 21:9 monitor, this has helped you make a bit of a better decision. I think the GTX 1060 is a very viable option, especially at 2560 by 1080. If you're going 3440 by 1440, you might have to turn a few more settings down to get playable frame rates, especially if you're going in the plus 100 Hz range. But overall, pretty impressed with the performance, and I think it's a great option. If you're going 3440 by 1440, you might consider something a little bit higher end, like a GTX 1070, or maybe one of the newer AMD cards, especially the newer ones that they're supposed to launch very soon, although I know nothing about those. But if you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button and let me know. Also down in the description, you can find links to stuff like my store, where you can buy shirts and mugs and pint glasses. And as always, thank you very much for watching my videos.